You are listening to the My First Period podcast, and today we talk all things sex, endometriosis, birth control, and puberty with Venus Libido. Enjoy! Hello, and welcome to the My First Period podcast with me, Lucy Evers, and joining me today is sex educator, endometriosis fighter, Venus Libido. How are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm excited to talk to you. So shall we get straight in with your story of your first period?
Yeah, let's go for it. My first period was actually quite a funny story. So I went to, I don't know, well, people in the UK will know what this is, but you know the theme park, Alton Towers?
Yes, I do.
So I went there for my cousin's birthday and we stayed in the hotel. And I was in the shower and the fire alarm went off. We had a room, like my cousin and myself, I was about 13, and our friends, and the adults were in a different room, and the fire alarm went off, and my cousin and all our friends ran out and forgot that I was in the shower. So I was left and came out and had no idea what was going on. And then my mum came and found me, and I had to rush out in just like a dressing gown. And then we were waiting outside to be let back into the hotel, and I just started bleeding. And I was like, Mum, I think I've just started my first period. That's how I'll always remember my period, is just being stuck outside after a fire alarm at Alton Towers. So yeah.
Oh my goodness. So you were 13?
I think I was about 13 or 12 or 13. Yeah.
Had many of your friends or relations, had you had that conversation with anyone yet?
About periods?
Yeah.
Only with my mum, really, and just a couple of school friends who had already started their period. And I was just like, oh, I still haven't started mine. I talk about this quite a lot, in the fact that, when I was younger, periods weren't really a topic of discussion between friends. Talking about it was a bit gross. The only time we would talk about it is if we were asking each other to check the back of our trousers. But other than that, it wasn't really something we spoke about.
Yeah. I was around a similar age when I first started my period. And it was not a conversation. I was well aware of them, but it was not a conversation that I'd had. I'd never spoken to any of my friends about it. I'm an only child, so I didn't have any sisters to talk to about it.
Yes, same.
Was your mum quite happy to have a conversation with you?
Yeah, I mean, my mum's quite free and open about things like that. And in our house, we talk about sex quite a lot, very open household when it comes to conversations around periods and sex and genitals and all that kind of thing. So yeah, my mum was always quite happy to talk to me about it, and was, prepared me, which obviously I'm very grateful for, because I have friends who, their mums never even told them about a period, and, just started bleeding and thought they were dying. So yeah, I was very, very lucky in the fact that, I came from a household where I was very prepared for it.
That's really good. I think it's becoming something more and more now that we have a conversation about. But I still think, which is why I want to do this, I still think there's that aspect of shame's quite a strong word, but there's still that tension when you have a conversation, when you mention the word period.
Yeah.
Did you feel as a young girl?
Yeah, I mean, I will always remember being in class and, being on my period and being in pain and being very paranoid about, bleeding through my school clothes onto especially the fabric chairs. And I was just always really scared, or, afraid to put my hand up and say, look, I need to go to the nurse. In the end, even the nurse would, never send me home. They would just give me the thickest sanitary pad, and I would just feel like I was wearing a nappy around school. Well, I got to the point where, obviously, because now I know I have endometriosis, my periods were quite bad growing up, and very, very heavy, that I ended up taking a mobile phone to school that you weren't allowed to do, and I would just walk out of class and just call my mum and say, come and get me, because I know they're not going to let me go home. I physically feel like I'm going to pass out. But yeah, I'll always remember really horrible things that happened at school. Looking back on it now, I can't imagine happens now, with the amount of talk around period poverty that happens. But I remember there was this one girl who, I'm assuming, couldn't afford sanitary products, and she would just bleed through her clothes all the time. And I remember even myself just being like, oh my god, that's really gross, because I didn't know otherwise that that poor girl really did probably just need someone to help her with her sanitary products.
I suppose, and this is why I think this conversation is so important, and conversations like this are so important, because kids can be cruel, kids can be
of
really
course.
mean, and I think having conversations throughout life about things like period poverty, which is really only a phrase that I've learned in the past 5 years, which seems insane. When I first learned of it, it felt crazy to me that, well, of course you should be able to have sanitary products. Of course, everyone should be available to everybody. So being someone that you are very vocal about your endometriosis struggle and fight, is how I found you. Actually, you did an Instagram live at the start of like March or something, or April. So that's how I found you, and that was right at the start of my endo diagnosis.
Oh, I'm so sorry you have it.
It's so rubbish, but which is why I'm so glad I found people like you and like a bunch of other Instagram people, because it's normalized a lot of things for me. So this comes on to the point of, if you could tell yourself when you were younger all of the pain and all of the stuff around just a quote unquote normal period that you've experienced, do you think you would have told yourself that, or do you think you've experienced your life experience, the learning curve was worthwhile?
No, I think, and this is why I do talk about endo quite a lot, because I know I have quite a young following, that I never even heard of the word endometriosis till last year, and this, I was 27 last year, so 27 years old, only first hearing the word endo. Growing up my whole life thinking that my pain and my heavy bleeding and my painful sexual encounters were normal, and the fact that I was bloated and miserable and depressed and didn't want to be alive, I don't think that anyone should have to endure that if they are lucky enough to get an early diagnosis. And I for years I thought that my depression and my anxiety and my pain was something that I would always just have to put up with as a woman. Like, I just thought that was something that, I just have to grow a pair of balls, as I've been told many times by male doctors, and suck it up. But that's not okay, and that's not okay to tell any young girl that they should have to deal with. I wish that I had known what that word was, and many other, health conditions that women face, a lot sooner, because I do not, for the life of me, being taught anything like that growing up. Not from my mother, not from my teachers, not from my sex educators, not from doctors, not from anybody. And that's not acceptable when this condition affects so many people with uteruses. Sorry, I wouldn't want to go. If I could change it, I wish I'd known.
I think that's something that's quite important, especially now when conversations are a lot more open than they even used to be when I was a teenager. I was diagnosed with OCD and depression how old am I now? 3 years ago. And I had to really count then. 3 years ago. I've only learned about what endometriosis is and how it affects me in the last 8 months. And every day I learn something new, and I go, oh, so that's got absolutely nothing to do with this typical depression that they've described to me. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got everything to do with the fact that my body has this condition, and it physically can't handle it. I'm sure you're well aware of, but for people who maybe don't know, it's completely debilitating.
It is.
It'll take weeks out of my life because I physically can't get up. There's no energy left in me. It feels, I had to describe it to my partner the other day, because he's very good with things like this, and he's very open to a conversation, which I feel very lucky about. But he genuinely didn't understand. I got out of bed, I sat on the sofa, and I physically couldn't. There was no strength left in my body to get up. And he was like, come on, go out and we'll do something, like take your mind off it. And I just went, but I can't. It's this. I mean, I don't think people see the extent of it.
No, I mean, I think from an outsider or someone who hasn't got the condition, and this is myself included for many years, I just thought, okay, so having something wrong with my uterus just meant having something wrong with my uterus. But the problem with endometriosis is it's not just pain in your uterus or heavy periods. It's fatigue, it's pain in your anus, it's pain down your legs, it's mentally draining, physically draining. You know, there's things in the future you have to worry about, whether I can have children, which then plays on your mental health, and the waiting list for surgery. That again is another thing. You know, it's not just like, okay, I've broken my ankle and it's going to repair itself. This is a condition that we have to live with and affects us every day of our lives. That in itself is also very mentally and physically draining. So trying to explain that to somebody, it's like, and also another thing which really upset me was the fact that this affected my sex life for so many years.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, someone who is very interested in sex and has a very high libido, I felt like I couldn't have sex because I was in pain, which was a massive, massive impact on my mental health and my relationship with my partners. And now I've had like the surgery, it has massively improved. And I feel so upset that I went through so many years of my life feeling like I was broken because I was in pain when I was having sex, and that was not what I was told sex was meant to be like, or is meant to be like. It's meant to be a pleasurable, enjoyable thing, and it never was for me.
So you are very vocal about having endometriosis, obviously we've said, but you're also very vocal about, I call you a sex educator because in my brain, that's how I see you on Instagram.
Yeah, I try to be.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good description. So I completely agree. I just assumed that sex was meant to be a little bit uncomfortable and meant to be painful and at certain times, and it was just something you had to, I hate this phrase, but just get on with.
Yeah.
Whereas learning things like, obviously there's a wide range of conditions that come part and parcel with having a uterus, unfortunately. Do you think now, as someone who is as vocal as you are, do you feel like your experiences and your voice is making a difference? Do you see it on like a tangible basis?
Yeah, definitely. I do get a lot of direct messages in my Instagram account, you know, from people who think they have endometriosis and ask me if they might have it. And obviously I'm not a doctor, but I can only advise on what my own experience is and the research I've done myself in terms of like symptoms. But I do get a lot of messages from people saying like, this is affecting my sex life, like what sort of things can I do to make it more comfortable for myself? Or, you know, I've gone away myself and done the research, like actually done the research. So like trying different positions and trying toys and CBD lubes. And yeah, just because, you know, like I said before, I'm someone who has always really enjoyed sex and talking about sex and exploring my sexuality. I wanted to better that for myself. And because I knew that I could do it, I then wanted to teach others that that was possible and that their sex life doesn't end just because they've got endometriosis or because they've got cervical cancer or whatever it may be. There's another reason why I did my show Private Parts, and I wanted to get my friend Karen Hobbs on, who had cervical cancer, and she talks a lot about being quite, you know, sexually active, and that, you know, your sex life doesn't end just because you have a problem with your sex organs and your uterus and your womb. Like, you know, you can still be very sexually liberated and enjoy your life, that aspect of your life.
I think you're exactly correct there. I don't see my uterus as a burden, so to speak, but I do see it as something that, and you sort of touched on it a minute ago, it's something you live with. It's not something you get over. It's not something you can, oh, well, it's been like 5 days my period, I'll just make it to the next month. It's, you live with it every day, and it's unavoidable. And yeah, you could go on this list of contraceptives, which I've had that said to me before when I've explained how painful and uncomfortable periods are, before knowing that it was all linked in. People just go, well, you know, you can stop it, you can go on. I've been on every contraceptive I could possibly think of, and every single one has had a detrimental effect to my not only physical health but my mental health. And I do think that's attributed a lot to my relationship with my period and my body. I know you've mentioned before that you're currently on the coil.
Yeah.
So how has your relationship been in the past with contraceptives, if you have used them?
Yeah, so I was on the pill since the age of 13. I'd been on one and then I've been on another one. So I'd only ever been on two different pills.
This to an advice from the doctor to lessen
Yeah.
periods.
Yeah, so this was like to like minimize the amount of days I would have a period and to reduce the pain and bleeding. It only did the first thing. So, I
Yeah.
had a shorter period. It didn't actually reduce the heavy bleeding or the period pains. And I do genuinely believe that being on the pill was a massive contribution to the fact that my mental health was so bad, because of, there is research behind that. And then as soon as I came off it, after finding I had endometriosis and being advised to have the Mirena coil fitted, I have noticed an improvement in my mental health since not being on it. My only issue with the coil, and this isn't something I would personally have ever had fitted, but it was advised by professionals to help my endometriosis, is that I now have like other issues with the fact that I have something inside me that I actually find very uncomfortable. Like I have a foreign object inside of me. I guess it's the same as taking medicine, but like something is there, and I have had lots of problems with it. And when I first had it fitted, I was having like yeast infections. I've had a couple of UTIs, and I never had any of these issues before. So I can only put it down to the fact that I have something new inside my body.
Right.
But I just keep being told like it needs to stay there. I've mentioned this before in my stories, but when I first had the Mirena coil fitted, I went to A&E a month after having it fitted and after my operation. And I said, like, I don't feel okay down there. Can someone look? So I went to A&E like 3 times, and on the third time I got so annoyed. I was like, I'm not leaving until someone has a look at my coil in case it's moved. And I had 2 nurses come in, and they didn't have the right equipment to have a look, so they used their iPhones.
Oh my goodness.
And I like looked down and they had their phones out, and I was like, excuse me, like, you haven't asked for my consent, if that's okay. You've put your phones out and I'm like stripped down from the waist. I think that's extremely unprofessional. And I hear stories like this all the time. And ever since then, it's kind of made me feel scared about someone investigating.
Yeah, totally. It's obviously, and you use it on your IGTVs, but private parts, they are yours. Those areas of your body, I know it sounds completely obvious to say so, but they're owned by you.
Yeah.
For want of a better phrase, they're nobody else's business. So when it comes to things like this, I think this is possibly why, feel free to disagree with me, but I think that's possibly why we keep it ends up being such a taboo subject, is because it's that air of mystery. And I think that was something I thought of as a young girl starting my period, and for want of a better phrase, becoming a woman, whatever that bloody phrase means. But that moment in your life, everything changes. Your body changes, your body starts changing shape, you start gaining weight in certain areas that you never did before. Like, I've always been a straight up and down type human. Always, my entire life. My cousin calls me 2 aspirins on an ironing board, and I do think she's correct. But when I started my period, these hips just appeared from nowhere that I'd never had before, and legs started getting slightly chunkier. I suppose it's because your body's preparing yourself for this it's a huge change in your body, a massive change.
Yeah.
Do you think as a teenager, I suppose 13 teenager, did you see those changes in your body, and did you feel that uncomfortableness or pressure?
I was and I still haven't, I wouldn't say I have a very full figure. I'm quite flat chested. I'm very small. Like, growing up, I was always the smallest in the class. I never had any boobs as a teenager. So I felt like I never developed in the way that my friends did at a very young age. And I always felt I was very much a tomboy, and I was more involved of hanging out with the boys than I was the girls, because I just felt like I didn't fit in. Honestly, I started to see a change in my body when I got to about 24, 25, and then I started to gain weight. And that was kind of similar to how my mum was as well. She said, she was very small and slim growing up, and she got to about 25 and started to see a difference in her body. So I was very late developer. So, but I did feel like, when I was growing up, I did feel very uncomfortable with my body because I didn't have boobs. I was very short.
So do you think, going back to the period side of things, did you feel a difference in your mental state? Obviously being a teenager, maybe you won't recall, but do you feel a difference in your brain thinking this is a huge change now?
Yeah, no, I do remember, and my mum says this quite a lot, you know, she noticed a difference as soon as I started my period in terms of my attitude towards people. I was quite a moody teenager, like very stubborn, and I was not interested in like other people's company. And she said I was always such a bubbly child, but as soon as I started like maturing and yeah, after my gaining my period, I just completely changed who I was. And I definitely did like notice that when I started getting into my 20s. I was like, I'm actually not the person I want to be. But that was because I was in pain all the time.
Right.
And
Okay.
because obviously my endometriosis was growing inside of me. And I've always grown up with a bad back, and, you know, and it was just like I felt constantly in pain, that obviously affected my mood and my mental health, and then projected that onto others, which obviously wasn't very nice.
How do you think your diagnosis and the fact that you're a menstruating human, how do you think those two things have affected each other? Do you think the endometriosis has put more pressure on your cycle? Do you think it's taken the pressure off because it's changed what a traditional cycle is?
I don't know, that's kind of a tricky question to answer, but I always knew there was something wrong,
Yeah.
but no one listened to me, so I kept ignoring it myself. And then I think the day that I got diagnosed, I remember like calling my mum and crying and being like, I can't believe I've got something wrong with me that's actually very serious. And obviously they tell you about having laparoscopy and how dangerous it is, and you know, you have to sign something because you could potentially die during surgery because it's so invasive. And I just remember sitting there like thinking, I don't know if I can go on, like I don't know how I'm going to deal with this for the rest of my life. And I just thought to myself, I can't have this attitude when I have the following that I have. This is my chance to use my platform and my privilege to talk about something that needs to be spoken about.
And something that's going to be an education for other people,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
definitely was for me. When you spoke about it, I thought, my God, she's literally listing the things that have happened for the last however
Yeah,
many years. And I just thought, okay, right, I'm not weird.
yeah.
This
So
is
yeah,
normal, for want of a better phrase.
yeah. So like for the first hour of finding out, I cried and I was upset, and then after being upset for an hour, then came anger, and I
Mm-hmm.
was angry of what I had experienced for the last 20 years of my life and being ignored. And I thought, okay, I need to use, and this is what I do with every situation. And this is why I started Venus Libido, because I was so angry that people were getting away with the way things they were doing to women, or the way that we were being treated as a society, and the fact that, you know, equal pay or mental health or whatever it may be, that I then just got angry, and I was like, I don't want anybody else to have to go through this. I felt the need to like use my platform to talk about it.
I think as white women, we have
Yeah,
a a privilege we can use for good to lift other people's voices up. All of the people that bleed in the world, however many millions there are, I'm sure that there's a disconnect with culture and people's background affects their experience and their life with menstruation. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I think it's quite a drastic jump. Obviously, neither of us can speak for that. We can empathize and we can feel it.
yeah.
Being in the position to be able to voice something that could
Mm.
possibly help someone else is something that we should take advantage of. Because if
Yeah,
one sentence can make someone feel less alone and make someone feel less afraid, then it's worthwhile.
yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And this is why, you know, people like myself, I need to use my privilege and, you know, like I said, my platform that I have online to talk about these things so that others don't feel alone, because I have that chance to do that, whereas others don't. And I think it's just really important that, especially what I've noticed is the amount of people that get dismissed, and that upsets me quite a lot. And I just think that I need to be that person that is standing by these other people who suffer with endometriosis and be like helping them fight for their right to be seen and to be heard,
Yeah.
which is the main objective to why I talk about it, because I don't want other people being so dismissed just because their pain or their symptoms are so similar to other things. And, you know, for many years, I was just being dismissed or being told I had IBS, and it was nothing to do with that. And, you know, a lot of people probably have it a lot worse and probably go undiagnosed longer because of, you know, a cultural thing or whatever it may be. But if, you know, we can just spread the word one person at a time, then we're doing our job at the end of the day.
It makes such a huge difference to people. When I first was diagnosed, I was very lucky to have 2 female nurses, and they were very lovely and they were very kind. And I was really uncomfortable because it's just so ridiculously painful. They could see I was sort of squirming, and I was just not, no matter where I put my body, I was just not comfortable. And they're both really kind, and I'm a musician, so we sat and chatted about music for about 20 minutes until my body had relaxed, because I was so crazy tense and I couldn't relax my body. So we sat and chatted for a bit, which was really nice. I was very grateful for them. And I asked them, how many of these do you do a day? These, like, obviously they do a lot of those scans, but how many of them are linked to this area rather than pregnancy or something like that? How many of them are linked to finding things like endometriosis, PCOS, IBD? How many of them are linked to things like this? And the lady shook her head and said, you wouldn't believe. Nowhere near the amount of people that have got it. It's nowhere near the number that actually come in. That breaks my heart, because it is invisible. It is an invisible thing, but for the person that is suffering with it, it's constant. It's so unavoidable throughout your day. So I do think it's so important how you speak about, like, your platform and the conversations that you have, because blimey, they've made a difference to me, so they must have made a difference to other people. So I do think it's such a positive thing. Going back to the actual bleeding side of things, when you were younger, was it a fear-based moment when your period first started, or was it not excitement's probably not the right word, but was it a fear-based thing, or was it oh my God, this has happened?
No, I was never scared of it. Like I said, because obviously I had the conversation with my mum quite a lot. I think I was embarrassed because of the situation I was in and being outside in a robe and it running down my leg. But I think I was more like, oh yeah, it's finally here. Like, obviously my mum was like, okay, it'll come soon. I was like, yeah, but all my friends have started, why is mine not here yet? And because I knew I was such a slow developer anyway, because of my body being so small, I was just like, oh, it's never gonna come. And I started getting paranoid that it wasn't coming. So when it came, I was like, oh yeah, finally I'm normal. I do bleed.
I suppose that's definitely a thing to think as a kid. You think it's so elusive and it's such this like mountain but realistically when you get to it, it's just very messy and quite annoying. It means you can't go swimming. It means you can't do all these things. So realistically, it's just kind of irritating more than this.
Yeah, I think as well for me, like growing up, I also found it very strange that I could never use tampons. I found them so uncomfortable. And looking back now, obviously that is a result of like having endo and being very worried of inserting things inside of my vagina because of the pain, which then later led on to like when it came to sex as well, and having to like retrain my body to feel comfortable with having things inserted into it. But I was like, I just thought I was abnormal, as I can't use a tampon. And I always had to use pads, which are obviously not, knowing now, very hygienic, especially from the companies I was buying them from back then. And I was always having thrush like after my period because of the sanitary pads. And yeah, I just always found like having them such a burden on my life and so irritating, because there was always more than just having a period. There was like, oh, I feel dirty, which is obviously not how we should be made to feel when we have a period. But yeah, just always felt like I had something else going on as well.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because I'm exactly the same. I can't use tampons, and I always thought it was, oh, I just don't know how to use them.
Yeah.
But since knowing all of the things that I know now about my body, it doesn't it's like, oh, of course I can't do that, because it's comfortable. It's not, it doesn't work. So that's a good question. My last question will always be pads, tampons, or cup. So what is your preferred?
Oh, I don't use any of those. I actually use period pants.
So like I use the Thinks ones. Is that the brand?
Yeah, I think you got Thinks. I actually use a company called Wooker, just because I was an ambassador for them last year, and I just think their pants are so comfortable. But I've completely tried to change my lifestyle in terms of like how much waste I'm creating, especially as a woman, in terms of like makeup and products and removing and taking off constantly. And then also my periods, I became very aware of, pollution caused by pads and tampons last year. And I was just like, I need to make this change in my life to be more sustainable. So yeah, I've just ever since last year been using pants, and I love them, and I would not use anything else. And especially after my surgery, for anyone who does have endometriosis and is going to have surgery, they are a really good thing to be wearing while you're recovering, because obviously you are bleeding. As soon as you come out of having an operation, like, you do have bleeding. So they were just so easy to wear a couple of hours and not have to worry about it. And you can't move very much after surgery, so they were just a massive lifesaver.
So I was the same as you. I'm vegan, and I try to be as zero waste as physically possible. I haven't bought any fast fashion since last year, and I'm chuffed about it.
Yay!
I'm very proud of myself. But maybe apart from a bra here and there. But
yeah, of course.
that, I think we're okay. So I was the same. I decided, because I've always used pads, and there's only certain pads that I can use because I've got ridiculously sensitive skin. So I always thought it was, I can only use these ones. And then I found Hey Girls, which are a Scottish company, and who do the buy a box, give a box type scenario.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
They're really awesome. I found them, and I found Thinks and Time of the Month, which are a Cardiff-based company who don't do the buy a box. It's a different way. It's the money goes to a charity rather than a physical box goes to someone.
Okay.
So I found those products and I'm disappointed in myself that it took me that long to find these kind of eco-friendly and organic and positive companies. But now I've found them, I tell everyone about them.
Yeah, I've got my mum on the pants,
Yay!
I literally think they're the most amazing invention. Like, they are fantastic, and they not only saving the environment, they're saving you money and saving you from being bloody taxed on products you should not be taxed on.
I don't know whether you feel the same about this. My periods are insanely heavy. So in order to do pants every day, I'd have to have like 8 pairs. So I wear them on when I feel like it's brewing. I wear the pants the few days before, and then when I'm on like the last day, I wear them the last like 1 or 2 days period. So they're a comfort. Do you find them a comfort?
Oh yeah, they're definitely a comfort thing. Yeah, absolutely. But I would say though, I have, like I said before, I've got very heavy periods, and I can wear these pants like on my heaviest and I'm fine.
Really?
Yeah, the Wooker ones are really good. Like, yes, I'm having a period at the moment. I'm not actually supposed to be having periods because I've got the coil, but for some reason I am, which is apparently okay. The last like 2 days I've been bleeding very heavily for the first time since my op, which is very strange. And I've been wearing the pants, and they can take quite a lot of fluid. If you go on Wooker, they actually show you some videos of them pouring like a cup of water onto the pants and it not leaking through. They are amazing.
What's the how do you spell it?
So it's WUKA.
Oh, okay. I'll have a look when we're done. That's any. So I've seen you use the on CBD oils. They've absolutely saved my life.
Yes, on are fantastic, and also the people that run on are amazing people. So I'm here for them all the time. And another company which is also fantastic and helped me a lot after surgery is a company called BU. And they have these amazing eucalyptus strips that you put on your tummy just to help reduce pain. And I wear them like as soon as I start having endo pain, because I don't really like taking painkillers. I'd rather use like natural things. So BU are also a really fantastic company who have amazing patches.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for having a conversation with me today. I think it's been great.
No, thanks for having me on. I hope it helps anyone who's listening. I hope it helps you in some way.
Yeah, I think it definitely will. And I think I always say that the sooner we change our language around things like mental health, invisible, quote unquote, invisible diseases, the sooner we change our language around them, I think attitudes will change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They'll be quick to follow.
Yeah.
Thank you for chatting with me. I'm so
That's all
chuffed that I've managed to have a chat with you. It's been really
No,
great.
thanks for having me.
Have a lovely rest of your day.
And you, thank you so much.
Thank you. That was it. That was the first official My First Period podcast. Can you believe it? Thank you so much to Venus for joining me for this conversation. I learned so much. She's such an interesting and insightful human being. It was really, really wonderful to chat with her. Find her on Instagram, Venus Libido. That's Venus, Libido. Did I spell that right? I think so. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I have been Lucy Evers. You have been absolutely marvellous. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your week. Take care. Bye.